It's that time of year where everyone's a cosplayer and we eat way more candy than we probably should. Halloween. And if you're like me, you probably enjoy watching horror movies during the season. But since this is a Toku channel, I was wondering which Toku shows and movies fit Halloween the best. We're talking about the darkest, creepiest, and goriest Toku projects ever that you can watch alongside traditional horror movies during your Halloween movie marathon. First, let's look at a few Kamen Rider projects that are a great fit for Halloween for different reasons. Shin Kamen Rider Prologue followed the story of Shin Kazumatsuri, and this dark film featured grotesque effects that would terrify a younger audience. This movie was made specifically for adults, and the practical effects were creepy and unsettling. Shin's transformation looked agonizing, and you could feel his pain as he transformed into a Kamen Rider, although his insect-like appearance looks way more organic than the armored riders that fans were used to. The story here focuses on scientific experimentation leading to unforeseen consequences, with biological and genetic elements being a main focus. Add to that the sheer brutality and violence on display here, and you've got a Kamen Rider movie that can stand toe-to-toe with some of the juggernauts of horror. Kamen Rider Black Sun was a reimagining of the classic Kamen Rider Black. This show had a dark and mature tone with a socially charged story that was gritty and depressing, but where it really fits into the horror theme is its extreme violence. The transformation scenes look extremely painful, just like Shin's, and the fight scenes are shockingly gory at times. This is definitely one of the bloodiest Toku shows ever, with kills on the level of Mortal Kombat fatalities. We also get an uncompromising look at human suffering and addiction, making the world feel bleak and hopeless at times. Not everyone will love it, but if you're someone who watches slasher movies for the brutality, you'll love what Black Sun has to offer. Speaking of remakes, Kamen Rider Amazons brought back the look and style of 1974's Kamen Rider Amazon, while dialing up the blood and gore to 11 and giving it a really dark tone. This show had a really depressing feel to it, with shocking scenes featuring decay, body horror, and cannibalism. The story focuses on a virus, and the writers here are bioweapons who are constantly bloodthirsty. Their animalistic tendencies and penchant for extreme violence result in tons of blood and gore throughout the series. The story's tense, with a feeling of impending doom throughout, and the practical effects made the show feel visceral and terrifying. Next, I want to talk about two horror-themed Kamen Rider series that are a lot campier and less violent, but they deserve to be mentioned nonetheless. Kamen Rider Kiva was a story about Fangires, which are basically vampires within the Riderverse. Taking clear inspiration from various Halloween and monster movie tropes, the presentation was gothic with tons of atmosphere. The show's namesake is a human Fangire hybrid, and this series featured tons of Halloween elements like bats, full moons, and just a dark vibe in general. The suits in the show are awesome, and Kiva would be an excellent series to watch around Halloween. I also want to mention Kamen Rider Ghost, a show that isn't really dark or what people would typically compare to horror, but it does have a bit of focus on death, the afterlife, and the occult, with spirits being a driving force of the narrative. We also get a good amount of fog and dark lighting, making the show feel really dynamic and otherworldly. Ghost also deals with hauntings and possession, so I think it deserves a mention, despite its more lighthearted tone. I definitely can't talk about horror-esque Toku without mentioning Garo. The series as a whole is heavily inspired by horror, with blood, gore, dark lighting, and a gothic tone. This series is synonymous with horror. Speaking of horror, the primary enemy force in the series is a demonic race called the Horrors that possess people due to their innermost dark desires. The Makai Knights exist to hunt these horrors down and cleanse the world of their evil presence no matter the cost. The creature designs are incredible, with costumes that look evil and terrifying, and they have unique abilities that are pure nightmare fuel. If you're new to Garo, I'd start with the original series, a story that follows a Makai Knight named Koga. This show sets the tone for everything that came after and established the Horrors as a demonic force to be reckoned with. The Ultra franchise was no stranger to horror elements either. Ultra Q from 1966 was a predecessor to Ultraman, and it revolutionized Toku with a dark, eerie tone that mixed a kaiju premise with storytelling that was reminiscent of the Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits. It was presented in black and white with moody and atmospheric cinematography that was way ahead of its time. The storytelling of Ultra Q leaned heavily on suspense, with episodes focusing on time anomalies, aliens, and reality itself. Instead of being a pure kaiju show, Ultra Q embraced the strange with a strong understanding of how to keep viewers on the edge of their seats. Stories would often finish without a satisfying resolution, leaving the audience with a sense of dread and unease. Ultraman Nexus is one of the darkest Toku shows ever, both in terms of lighting and tone. This series stripped away the optimism found in most Ultra shows and replaced it with a bleak and dreadful world that would see its inhabitants struggle to keep their sanity. The type of horror found in Nexus is extremely human, focusing on paranoia, amnesia, and PTSD. This show is also very Orwellian, with elements of societal control and thought policing throughout. The main enemies featured here were the space beasts, and they were the stuff of nightmares, both in the way they look and the way they stalk victims. This gave the show a sense of impending doom, and Ultraman Nexus was dripping with atmosphere. This show was psychological horror in the purest sense. Within the Metal Hero franchise, Metalder stands out as one of the most horror-focused seasons, with the show's namesake being part human and part machine, reminiscent of Frankenstein's creation. He awakens to discover that he's a cyborg created for war, leading to confusion and deep internal conflict. This show dives into themes of deep existentialism, and Metalder constantly struggles with who he is and what he stands for. The tone is dark and introspective, while the excellent audio design adds to the eerie feeling. The creature designs are monstrous and horrifying with a mixture of organic and mechanical elements. This show is dark sci-fi at its best, and it was a criminally underrated Toku series with obvious horror influence. Juko B-Fighter was a show that had dark undertones and a ton of horror DNA beneath the surface, with an apocalyptic atmosphere and villains inspired by the occult. The world here was gritty and unwelcoming, adding a sense of unease to the entire project. The Jamal Empire had excellent suit designs, with Gaum himself having a creepy and unsettling look. A lot of the monsters of the week looked like horrifying abominations, creatures similar to things we know, but with twisted and disgusting abnormalities. Cinematically, this show uses heavy shadows and fog, along with the inclusion of surprisingly gory practical effects to give an overall dark and creepy vibe that's perfect for horror fans. I also want to mention Saban's Big Bad Beetleborgs, a kids show that isn't dark or moody, but it does pay homage to classic horror in the form of the monsters at Hillhurst. The three heroes of the show arrive to the haunted mansion and come across its monstrous inhabitants based on classic movie monsters like the Mummy, the Wolfman, Dracula, and Frankenstein's creation. These guys are a huge focus for the story, and they're also the main source of comic relief on the show. Although this show isn't spooky or scary, it's definitely worth a mention due to it being a love letter to the golden age of horror. The legendary original Godzilla from 1954 is an absolute nightmare that showcases the world in a bleak and depressing display of horror. Presented in black and white, the mood of this film is dark and somber, with mass death and nuclear trauma at the forefront. In fact, Godzilla himself is the result of nuclear testing, making this a sobering look at what humanity is capable of. This original classic inspired generations of monster movies with its practical effects. Later entries in the series leaned into campiness much more than this project, and Godzilla's post-apocalyptic world captivated audiences with its unique and groundbreaking take on horror. 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah was strange, unique, and disturbing due to its surreal visuals and nightmare-inducing cinematography. This film focused heavily on body horror, with Hedorah melting victims with acid. Much like other Godzilla projects, the world is polluted and apocalyptic, with this state of the planet adding to the overall horror. Hedorah himself is easily one of the most hideous-looking kaiju ever made. He's basically a walking sludge monster. This film is eerie, psychedelic, and horrifying. Super Sentai is usually thought of as a series with bright colors, slapstick comedy, and lighthearted entertainment, but I want to mention Dairanger due to the Gorma tribe. These villains are basically demons that are born from the dark feelings of humans, similar to the horrors from Garo. This show explores topics like possession, curses, and spiritual warfare. Also featured were dark stories about the underworld. Dairanger also had some creepy suit designs that would probably terrify the younger audience. So despite this show being more kid-friendly, I think it deserves a mention here. I also want to talk about some lesser-known Toku projects, starting with 1989's Tetsuo the Iron Man, which blurs the line between Toku and horror with a heavy emphasis on the grotesque. This mechanical nightmare takes heavy influence from films like Eraserhead and The Fly, making for a disturbing film that will leave audiences feeling uncomfortable while watching. In this movie, a man finds himself becoming a machine as he's haunted by dark fantasies involving metal. This film uses visceral practical effects utilizing stop motion and homemade materials. The unsettling tone here is off the charts, and it'll definitely stick with you long after watching. Hakaider is a bit of a cult classic in the Toku fandom, and its cyberpunk dystopian atmosphere and gothic imagery make it a great choice for horror fans. This action-heavy film featured occult and religious elements, along with an unapologetic portrayal of a corrupted society. Hakaider featured extreme violence with plenty of gore, along with a dirty and rusted look to most of the sets. Hakaider himself had a dark and emotionless suit design, and he was presented as an anti-hero, rather than a traditional hero. This film's gritty look, along with its dark elements, give it a place among horror movies. Zeiram was a film in 1991 with a heavy focus on suspense and terrifying monsters in a stylish world with elements of dark fantasy, sci-fi, and of course horror. This movie follows a bounty hunter named Iria who battles against an alien creature named Zeiram. Zeiram's design was unique and creepy, and the film's dark lighting and visceral effects added to the overall feeling of dread that the filmmakers were going for. Zeiram himself felt like an unstoppable force, similar to many of the horror icons of the Western world. This project is heavily reminiscent of Alien, with a mix of survival horror and action, and it's a great choice for horror and Toku fans alike. So if you're looking for a great Toku movie or show to watch alongside Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Scream, or Halloween, these are the ones that I think would be the best choice. But I want to know your picks in the comments. If you're new here, be sure to transform into a subscriber by hitting the subscribe button. Join my Discord if you want to hang out with me and other cool Toku fans, and if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a ton if you smack the shit out of that like button. Thanks for watching, have an awesome Halloween, and I'll catch you next time.